Rain hammered the windshield as I rolled into the daycare lot off Austin Bluffs Parkway, the wipers dragging a tired arc across glass and noise. My phone lit in the cup holder. I expected a reminder about milk or a photo of finger paint. Instead, one message remapped my life in 12 blunt words. I am moving to Madrid with Ariel. I transferred the savings. I stared until the screen dimmed, until my breath remembered how to move. Inside the foyer, it smelled like crayons and bleach and apples. Piper, 5 and fearless, flew at me with her backpack bouncing and her hair escaping its braid. "Mama, did you bring the cinnamon crackers?" she asked, eyes shiny as new marbles. I heard my voice say yes, heard myself promise a grocery stop, heard myself sign the clipboard with a hand that felt borrowed. I am Captain Cadence Kincaid, 36, logistics officer, assigned to Fort Carson. I can route fuel to a desert convoy in a sandstorm with radios down and tempers up. I can brief a room full of colonels without my heart stuttering. But standing under a paper sunflower, with Piper's mitten in my fist, I felt small as a folded map. Back in the car, the numbers were waiting. Savings at 0. Checking at $307 and some weary cents. Rent for our 2-bedroom on Pikes Peak Avenue, due in 5 days for $1,950. Miles had not only left. He had planned his exit like a campaign. Lorraine, my mother-in-law, called while I buckled Piper in. "Cadence, what have you done?" she said, the way some people say hello. "Miles told me you threatened to keep his daughter from him unless he gave you more money." I watched Rain race the glass. "He left, Lorraine," I said. "He drained our accounts and flew to Spain." She clicked her tongue, that sound she uses when I wear the uniform to a family dinner. "If you had been a softer wife, he would not have looked elsewhere." Then she hung up. I drove home past pizza shops and pawn signs, past the mural of a mountain I love. Piper sang about rainbows and dragons. I kept my eyes ahead, and my breathing locked in a count of 4. At our apartment, I set her on the couch with a blanket and a cartoon. In the kitchen's thin light, I opened the laptop and logged into our bank again, as if staring at the emptiness could refill it. When I could not swallow the panic, I poured it into a vow. Piper would not see me break. Not here, not now. I texted him back one line. "Thank you for the notice. We will be just fine." Eventually. Absolutely. Anyway. The next morning, the Colorado sky pressed low and gray, as if it carried the same weight that sat on my chest. I dropped Piper at daycare with her stuffed bunny tucked in her bag, kissed her hair, and told her I would be back soon. Then I drove toward downtown, the silence inside the car thick enough to choke on. I needed answers. I needed to look in Miles's eyes, to understand how the man who once swore to protect me had weaponized every weakness I ever confessed. At his office, the receptionist shifted uncomfortably when I asked for him. "Captain Kincaid, he resigned 2 weeks ago," she said, fingers tightening around her pen. My throat scraped dry. 2 weeks ago?" I echoed. He had still been smiling at me across the dinner table then, still kissing Piper's forehead goodnight. This had not been a rash escape. It was a campaign drawn on blueprints I never saw. The elevator felt like a coffin on the way down. I sat in the car until my palms stopped shaking long enough to dial Ethan, one of Miles's old colleagues, who had once eaten barbecue at our table. When his voice came, it was low and guilty. "Cadence, I'm sorry." He told me months ago. He swore me to silence. "Said you'd be better off when he was gone." Better off? I almost laughed, the sound brittle. "He drained our savings, Ethan." He left me and Piper with rent due and nothing in the account. Ethan went quiet, then whispered, "I didn't know he'd do that. God help me, I thought it was just about him and Ariel." That evening, I found a thick envelope wedged under our apartment door. A courier's mark scrawled across the front. Inside was a petition for divorce already filed in El Paso County. My name printed cold in black ink. My husband's new Madrid address typed neatly beneath. The petition claimed I had ample funds to provide for Piper alone. My knees weakened. Lies on legal paper felt heavier than truth whispered in the dark. I rummaged through the desk Miles had abandoned, searching for some thread to pull. Beneath utility bills and junk mail, I found a birthday card addressed to his mother, Lorraine. The neat handwriting cut into me. Thank you for helping with the apartment deposit in Spain. Ariel and I can't wait to show you our new home. Love, Miles. The date was 3 months ago, the same week he had told me he was being considered for a promotion. Rage and clarity fused in my chest. Lorraine had not just known, she had bankrolled his betrayal. Every time she had looked at me across her polished table and called me not enough, she was already planning to help strip me of everything. I snapped a photo of the card and sat back hard in the chair, the storm inside me steadier than the thunder cracking over the front range. This was no longer about a marriage falling apart. It was about survival. It was about Piper. And it was about proving that no one, not Miles, not his mistress, not Lorraine, would erase me without a fight. The wind off the front range cut sharp as I walked into the modest law office, tucked between a bakery and a pawn shop. My college friend Lydia had insisted I meet her former roommate, an attorney who handled messy custody disputes. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and coffee, and behind the desk sat Marion Holt. She was younger than I expected, with kind eyes that gave nothing away. I laid the envelope, the drained account statements, and the photo of Lorraine's card on her desk. My voice cracked only once as I explained. He took everything he filed from Madrid. And he is trying to paint me as the villain. Marion leafed through the papers, her expression tightening. Joint accounts let him withdraw funds, but judges don't like abandonment. With proof of hidden money and parental rights relinquished in Spain, we can fight. We'll file an emergency motion for custody and temporary support. The word custody squeezed around my ribs. Miles wanted to take Piper, to uproot her and rewrite our story. I thought of her last drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow labeled Mommy and Me. I would not let anyone erase that. That night, after Piper fell asleep clutching her bunny, I powered on the old laptop Miles had left behind. I tried his predictable passwords, our anniversary, her birthday, his favorite football team. The screen unlocked. My hands shook as I scrolled through his folders. There it was, a resume addressed to a multinational company in Madrid. Start date the same week he texted goodbye. And a draft email to Ariel, boasting about the freedom to rebuild a family without her dragging us down. My chest hollowed, but I kept digging. Then I found a document labeled Custody Strategy. My breath stalled. Inside, notes detailing my medical records after my last deployment, when nightmares had stalked me until therapy stitched me back together. He wrote, use history of post-deployment anxiety to challenge maternal stability. He had turned the hardest chapter of my service into a weapon. I pushed back from the desk, bile rising. That darkness he pretended to help me through. The mornings he brought me coffee, the nights he rubbed my shoulders. He had been taking notes, stockpiling ammunition. In another folder sat scanned statements for a Cayman Islands account. $48,000, transferred incrementally over years. The name on the account, Miles Caldwell and Lorraine Caldwell. My mouth went dry. They had been siphoning from our life all along, hiding money while I pinched pennies after each field exercise. I printed everything. Each page hissed from the machine like a match being struck. Proof of deception, of conspiracy, of a war I never volunteered to fight, but one I would finish. When the printer fell silent, I stood at the window and watched the lights of Colorado Springs flicker against the night. Piper's soft breathing filled the apartment. My resolve hardened like steel. Miles and Lorraine thought they could break me by emptying accounts and scribbling lies into petitions. They forgot I was a soldier. And I was about to fight the most important campaign of my life, for Piper, for truth, and for the dignity they tried to bury. The call came just after dawn, while I was buttoning Piper's jacket for school. The number flashed unfamiliar, but the voice that spilled through was one I knew too well. "Cadence, it's Ariel," she said, brittle and rushed. I nearly dropped the phone. The woman who shattered my marriage was whispering like someone cornered. "I need protection," she blurted before I could answer. "Miles is unraveling. He has accounts in Liechtenstein, over $200,000. He promised me a new life, but now he's lashing out. If he finds out I spoke to you, he'll come after me too. I steadied my voice, though my pulse slammed against my throat. Why should I believe you? Because I have the proof, she said. Bank statements, transfers, emails. If you help me secure immunity, I'll hand it all over. I listened to Piper humming a school song as she slipped her tiny arms into her backpack straps. My daughter's innocence was the only anchor I had left. Send it to me, I said at last. But understand, Ariel, this isn't about saving you. It's about saving Piper. That evening, Marian reviewed Ariel's sworn statement and the documents she had delivered through a secured drive. The files were damning: screenshots of offshore transfers, messages from Miles bragging about leaving me penniless, and most chilling of all, his plan to file for full custody once the narrative of instability stuck in court. Marian leaned back, eyes sharp. With this, we can request an emergency hearing. The judge won't ignore accounts hidden overseas or his own mistress confirming the scheme. I felt a strange mix of revulsion and relief. Ariel hadn't betrayed Miles out of loyalty to me. She was protecting herself. But her selfishness was my lifeline. That night, I tucked Piper into bed with her bunny pressed against her cheek. She looked up at me. Mama, is Daddy still on his trip? I paused, throat tight. Yes, sweetheart. But we're safe here. That's what matters. She nodded, drifting into dreams, unaware of the storm still gathering beyond our small apartment walls. At the kitchen table, I stared at the stack of evidence growing thicker with each discovery. A marriage certificate, now a mockery. Bank statements glowing like accusations. Emails that bled with betrayal. Outside, the mountains loomed dark against the Colorado sky, silent witnesses to the war I was preparing to fight. Miles thought he could vanish across the ocean, thought he could erase me with legal tricks and his mother's money. But tomorrow he would land back on American soil, angry, reckless, and certain of his power. What he didn't know was that I was ready, and this time, I wasn't just a wife scrambling to survive. I was a soldier with every weapon I needed: truth, evidence, and the unbreakable love of a mother defending her child. The courthouse in downtown Colorado Springs loomed like a fortress, its gray stone walls swallowing the early morning light. I walked through the metal detectors with Marian at my side, a folder of evidence pressed tight to my chest. My uniform was neatly pressed, my ribbons lined in quiet testimony, but my palms sweated all the same. This was not a deployment. This was a battle for my daughter's life. Inside the courtroom, Miles sat with his attorney, smug in a tailored suit that didn't quite hide the exhaustion in his eyes. Lorraine perched behind him like a general on her throne, lips pinched into disdain. When she caught my gaze, her expression said everything. You are nothing! The judge entered and the room rose. Marian began our case with steady precision. She laid out the drained accounts, the sudden resignation, the Madrid job contract, and finally the offshore accounts Ariel had exposed. The courtroom hushed when she introduced the custody plan Miles had drafted, the one where he labeled me unstable, unfit, dangerous. I stared at the wood grain on the table, willing my face not to show the hurt. Those words weren't just strategy, they were daggers, sharpened from memories of nights when I could barely sleep after deployment. When the judge looked up from the papers, her eyes were steel. Captain Kincaid, do you acknowledge treatment for post-deployment anxiety? I stood. My voice trembled once, then steadied. Yes, Your Honor. I sought therapy because I wanted to be the best mother I could be. My service left scars, but it also gave me discipline, strength, and resolve. I will never apologize for healing, and I will never allow anyone to twist it into a weapon against my child. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even Miles's lawyer shifted uneasily. Then Marian unveiled the photo of Lorraine's card, the proof she had funded the apartment overseas. Gasps echoed, and Lorraine's face blanched. Though she quickly masked it with fury, Miles's lawyer tried to pivot, painting me as aggressive, unstable, a soldier who lived in combat rather than family. But the judge cut him short. I've seen enough, she said, voice like a hammer. The accounts are hereby frozen. Temporary full custody is granted to Captain Kincaid. Mr. Caldwell will have supervised visitation only, pending further review. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Marion's hand touched my arm, grounding me. Behind me, Piper wasn't there, but I could almost hear her laugh echoing in my chest, the one she made when she spun in circles until she fell over giggling. That sound was my victory. As we left the courtroom, Lorraine hissed through her teeth, "You should be ashamed." But Marion turned sharply, her voice low and cutting. "Say one more word, and I'll have you subpoenaed for aiding abandonment. You may want to call your own lawyer." Lorraine recoiled as if struck. Outside, the air was bright and sharp with mountain wind. For the first time since Miles' text shattered my life, I felt the stirrings of something I had almost forgotten: hope. But I also knew this wasn't the end. Men like Miles didn't surrender, and women like Lorraine didn't back down. The real war had only just begun. The knock came just after midnight. I froze, heart hammering, until I realized it was only the wind rattling the balcony door. Piper stirred in her sleep, but didn't wake. Her small frame curled beneath the blanket. I eased back to the kitchen table where Marion's latest email glowed on the laptop screen. The forensic accountant had traced the transfers deeper than we expected. Not only the Cayman Islands account, but wires that led to a hidden trust Lorraine had built for Miles years ago. Nearly 200,000, hidden neatly beneath layers of shell companies. My hands shook as I scrolled through the report. This wasn't just betrayal, it was orchestration. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an international number. I answered cautiously. "This is Captain Kincaid." A clipped European voice replied, "This is Human Resources at Aurora Global. We regret to inform you that your husband's contract has been terminated. Someone forwarded us disturbing documents about custody disputes and financial misconduct signed in your name." My blood ran cold. I never sent those. They emailed me a copy. The header bore my name, but the words were poison, twisting truths into grotesque shapes. The only person who had been in my apartment recently was Lorraine. She had rifled through my papers the night she pretended to offer comfort. Within the hour, Miles called, fury crackling through the line. "You cost me my job! You won't see a dime now. How could you do this?" I cut him off, voice steady. "It was your mother. Check the metadata. She sabotaged you to keep control." Silence. Then ragged breathing. "I'll call you back." When he did, his tone was fractured. He forwarded texts between himself and Lorraine. There it was in black and white, her plan to destroy his position so he would be dependent on her. Her suggestion that my service record made me an easy target. Miles had thought he was in control. In truth, he was only a pawn. I sent everything to Marion. By afternoon, she filed motions for identity fraud and conspiracy. The judge approved an emergency order compelling Lorraine to produce her financial records. At the next hearing, Marion stood tall as she laid out the scheme. "This wasn't just abandonment, Your Honor. It was a calculated effort to erase a mother and her child's security. Mrs. Caldwell not only financed the escape, she actively sabotaged her own son and attempted to frame my client in the process." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Lorraine's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Miles slumped, eyes darting as if realizing the ground beneath him was collapsing. The judge ordered a full forensic accounting, including Lorraine's accounts. Every hidden dollar would be unearthed. And for the first time, Lorraine's perfect mask cracked. She gripped her pearls with trembling fingers, knowing the empire she built on contempt and control was about to be dragged into the light. That night, standing on my balcony overlooking the lights of Colorado Springs, I breathed the mountain air deep into my lungs. For years, Lorraine had treated me like an interloper, and Miles had treated me like a burden. But now, their empire of lies was burning, and I was still standing. This was no longer just survival. This was victory in motion. The weeks that followed were a storm of subpoenas and depositions. Forensic accountants traced wire after wire, peeling back the layers of deception Miles and Lorraine had built. Each page of evidence felt like another brick pulled from the walls of their empire. Offshore balances, hidden trusts, even a slush fund Lorraine kept in her maiden name, all of it dragged into daylight. The courtroom filled again, reporters lingering outside. Miles looked thinner, the swagger stripped from him. Lorraine sat rigid, her lawyer whispering frantically, but the judge's eyes never softened. When the accountant testified, the numbers alone were a verdict. Nearly $300,000 hidden, while Miles claimed poverty. Licensed IEP, while I counted pennies for rent. The judge's gavel struck. All accounts are seized pending distribution. Custody remains solely with Captain Kincaid. Mr. Caldwell, your visitation will remain supervised. Mrs. Caldwell, the court will review charges of fraud and identity misrepresentation. Lorraine gasped, her polished mask collapsing. For decades, she had ruled every room she entered. Now she was just another defendant waiting for a hearing date. Miles leaned forward, eyes hollow, voice breaking. "Mother, what have you done?" But her silence was answer enough. Outside, the press swarmed, shouting questions about offshore accounts and betrayal. I shielded my face, but inside, the vindication burned steady. Not triumph over them, but proof to myself that I had not imagined the cruelty, that I had not been powerless. Back at the base, my commander called me in. "Kincaid, you've carried yourself with more discipline through this storm than some officers show in combat," he said. "Take the time you need, but know this. You have the Army's respect." His words steadied me more than I expected. At home, Piper painted rainbows across construction paper, her laughter ringing through our apartment. "Mama, look! It's us!" Two stick figures again, this time with the word strong scrawled above. My eyes blurred, but my smile held. Miles drifted further into shadow. His reputation in marketing circles was scorched by court transcripts and headlines. Potential employers turned him away. Ariel, true to her word, fled back overseas under her immunity deal, leaving him stranded. He had gambled everything and lost, not just money, but every piece of credibility he once wielded. Lorraine faced hearings of her own, her name whispered in country clubs as a cautionary tale. She no longer looked at me with contempt. She barely looked at me at all. And me? I signed the deed on a small townhouse in a quiet Colorado Springs neighborhood, its backyard big enough for Piper's swings. I hung her rainbow drawing on the fridge, a banner of survival. For the first time in months, I lay in bed and slept without fear of a phone buzzing me awake with disaster. The war they started was over, and I had not only endured, I had rebuilt. Spring came early that year, the air in Colorado Springs warming before the snow had even finished melting from the mountains. I stood in the backyard of our new townhouse, watching Piper pump her little legs on the swing until she nearly touched the sky. Her laughter carried on the breeze, brighter than any metal I had ever pinned to my chest. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and something sweeter. Peace. The walls bore her drawings, rainbows, soldiers, stick figures labeled Mommy and Me. On the fridge hung the court order granting me full custody, a piece of paper that meant freedom. Miles called only twice after the hearings. The first time, to rage at losing everything. The second, to whisper apologies that sounded like echoes in an empty canyon. I let both fade into silence. He had chosen his path, and so had I. Lorraine never called again. The last I heard, she was selling off her properties to cover penalties, her name whispered with pity instead of power. One evening, after tucking Piper into her new bunny-covered bed, she looked at me with sleepy eyes. "Mama, are we enough?" she asked softly. My throat tightened, but my answer was steady. "Yes, sweetheart. We are more than enough." She smiled, clutching her stuffed bunny close, and drifted into dreams. Later, I sat at the kitchen table, uniform jacket folded neatly on the chair beside me. My service had taken me across deserts and through storms, but nothing compared to the battlefield of betrayal I had just crossed. I thought of that text Miles sent, the one meant to shatter me. Good luck with rent. He had meant it as a curse, but it had become a spark, igniting strength I didn't know I still carried. The lesson was carved deep. Family is not the one that abandons you in the storm, nor the ones who plot against you behind polished doors. Family is the child who trusts you to keep the world steady, the friends who hand you a lifeline, and the courage you find when everyone else hopes you will break. I lifted my coffee mug toward the window, to the dark outline of the Rockies beyond the glass. "We're still here," I whispered. "We're stronger than ever." Piper stirred in her sleep, murmuring a dream. I smiled. The life we were building, brick by brick, laugh by laugh, was ours alone. Not survival, not recovery, but something new, something whole. And as I turned off the light, I knew this was the ending of their story. But for us, it was only the beginning. When I look back now, I see more than betrayal and loss. I see the strength I never thought I had, the resilience that carried me through nights of fear and mornings of doubt. My husband and his family tried to strip me of dignity, security, and even my daughter. Instead, their schemes revealed what truly matters. Piper and I built a home filled with laughter, art on the walls, and peace that cannot be stolen. The greatest lesson I learned is this: no one can define your worth but you. Healing takes courage, and rebuilding takes patience. But every step forward is proof that love is stronger than betrayal. If this story touched you, share it, subscribe, and join our community. Together, we remind each other that no storm lasts forever, and that even after the hardest battles, a new beginning always waits.